Hi, it's Paul Guppy with the Washington Policy Center. This is our latest update on issues. Today, as always, I want to remind everyone to like, share, subscribe. We appreciate that participation. It helps our audience grow. And today's issues I'm going to cover are 6 items. One is emerging details about the budget crisis that the state faces, supposedly coming up in January. One is a rumor about school choice in our state that I'll cover. The latest news on beef imports and how they affect farmers and ranchers in Washington. One question is Washington still a tech hub? Are we able to attract high-tech businesses? Fifth will be the latest on banning gas cars in Washington state and what's going on with EV subsidies, electric vehicle subsidies. And lastly, a quick touch on a guest op-ed that we have in the Seattle Times. We're very happy about that. Next is I want to mention very quickly to encourage people to go to our website and click on the Give button to donate. So as my friends know, I give away my opinion for free, often without being asked. However, Washington Policy Center as a whole is supported entirely by membership and voluntary donations. And actually, we're kind of proud about that. We do not take any government money at all. So if you get a chance, please go to washingtonpolicycenter.org. And then on the right, please click on the Give button. We greatly appreciate a donation at any level. So now moving on to issues. The supplemental budget debate is coming up, as I mentioned, in January. Details about what agencies are asking for are now rolling out. The learned Todd Myers, our Vice President for Research, has been going through line by line what different agencies are asking for, and he notices a pattern. And in fact, he quotes a Democrat operative from the past who had said, the budget is a moral document. Where your treasure is where your heart is, which actually is kind of a misquote from the Bible. I'm not sure if it applies to public budgets, but we'll follow up on that. And so Todd says, let's take them at their word. And he is looking at the state budget and seeing where the so-called budget crisis is coming from. And what he finds is that priorities are upside down often in the budget. One example that he gives is the legislature earlier this year cut the Crime Victims Fund by $21 million, but they added $22 million for local climate planning. They also added billions of dollars in pay raises for state unions. So they're getting their money up front, big increases in compensation going to state workers. But at the same time, the legislature underfunded the state Medicaid program. They cut low-income rental assistance. They even are failing to provide money for technical support for the state suicide hotline. So you find items like that, large and small, that are underfunded, and yet political priorities go to favored interest groups, organized unions, or anyone who has helped elect the current leadership in our state. And that's that circle that you get. At the same time, they suppress costs that the state is putting on all of us. And one example is the legislature specifically instructed state utilities, private and public utilities, to not inform consumers of the cost of the Inslee carbon energy tax that was imposed a few years ago. This is a massive, expensive tax that hits us with home heating, gasoline, things like that. Public utilities are not permitted to provide a line on your monthly utility bill that shows how much that tax is. So there's a kind of deception going on there. So I provide this perspective, and Todd's blog on our website provides more detail about that to show what the framing is going to be when the legislature meets in January. And you will hear endlessly about how we don't have enough revenue despite $9 billion in new taxes. And second part of the story is going to be the Trump administration, the federal government is cutting here and there. We have to backfill. Also not true. So stories about federal cuts pales in comparison to the amount of money the legislature gave away in pay raises, literally billions of dollars to increase the costs of operating the state government day to day. That was a voluntary decision by the majority back in May. Governor Ferguson signed that budget along with the tax increases, and yet they still say that they're coming up short. Expect a lot of finger pointing and blame towards the bugaboo, horrible, oh, it's the Trump administration, it's the federal government, when actually the state does not have its own fiscal house in order. Next issue is a rumor that we had heard that Governor Ferguson, who has indicated he doesn't like school choice to begin with, but maybe had decided against allowing Washington state school children to access the new federal school choice program. That rumor is not true, we found out. Vicki Murray on our staff chased that down. So there still is an open possibility that Governor Ferguson will issue a statement, a letter, executive order, that's all he has to do, to say that Washington state citizens are allowed to, Washington state students are allowed to receive money through the federal tax credit school choice program. Washington taxpayers can participate. The governor can't stop that. So if people want to donate up to $1,700 to the federal school choice program, they can do that through their tax return. But that money will not come to Washington state children unless the governor opts us in. So that's still an open possibility. We hope that he is considering that. Ferguson did issue a statement that it's the state's paramount duty, this is in the state constitution, to provide for the education of all children residing within our borders. That's a good principle, it's good policy. The mistake comes along when the assumption is that that can only be provided through the traditional monopoly school public education system. That part is not true. No court has ever said that, and the Constitution doesn't say that either. So there are private means, or as I mentioned, the school choice program created at the federal level, which would create millions and millions of free federal dollars coming to the children of our state. It wouldn't cost the state a single dime. It would not cut public education. It's just a checkbox opt-in that would free up that money for us, so that we can participate along with every other state. From a policy point of view, it also makes sense to take an all of the above approach when it comes to funding education for children, whether it's public, private, homeschooling, whatever those options are. The governor, we think, should be open to all sources of funding for that, including this new federal program. We'll see how that plays out. Next issue is beef imports. So Pam Lewison, our agricultural expert, has been following this very carefully. Again, more policy at the federal level. The Trump administration has indicated that they want to open the U.S. market to beef imports from Argentina. Washington, and in fact, U.S. farmers and ranchers are very concerned about that. We think that there are two factors that need to be played in here. Number one, our federal officials, including the president, need to listen to the interests of the agricultural community in our state, ranchers, farmers that produce beef here so they can be competitive. And the second thing flows from that, which is the key to lower food prices is a good business climate in our state and across the country. But we focus on Washington because there are tremendous B&O taxes, property taxes. The legislature recently imposed a tax on the sale of farm equipment in our state. And there are huge land use regulations that prevent farmers and ranchers from cutting costs and being more competitive. Those are the areas where we think public officials should focus both at the state and the federal level. One background fact is that nearly a third of the land in Washington state is owned by the government at the state or federal level. In fact, I think that's a conservative number. It's probably higher than that. So with that, we think that public officials should always look at their own policies first before they start talking about how to make the market work better. Better business climate would help our farmers and ranchers, both with beef and all other food production. The way we put that is our challenge to public officials when they talk about affordability or any other problem is, how are you contributing to the problem itself? So public policy should be examined first before we look at market forces, things like that. Next issue is Washington state still a tech hub? So our technophile on staff, Donald Kimball, has written about this on our blog, and he is pointing out that Forbes magazine put out the list of 50 top AI companies and that no Washington state company made the list. So we are always looking for early indicators that our position compared to the other 49 states may be slipping. This is one of those. Washington state has said that we have are a tech center. We have been for decades. I would argue we're a tech center going back more than 100 years when Boeing and aerospace began in this state in the early 20th century. And we have more companies since then. You could rattle them off: Microsoft, Amazon, Adobe, and so on. So that's pretty obvious. We like to celebrate that. But what elected officials miss is when they have created a business climate with so many regulations, so many new taxes, capital gains, income tax. Seattle imposed a head tax on executives. These all add up, high property taxes. And then Then we turn around and we're like, well, we're not a tech hub anymore. What happened? Why are these national and even global companies deciding to go someplace else? It's a creeping burden that in their desire for money, our state leaders in Olympia tend not to notice that they're suppressing the ability to have jobs and growth and investment in our state. We hope that that will turn around. The way I put it here in my notes is a hostile business climate chases startups away, and that's definitely true. And by the way, those startups and investors, they don't announce, we're not coming to Washington State because it's too expensive, it has a hostile business climate. They just quietly go someplace else and you never hear from them. So it's that lost opportunity cost that we think that our state leaders are missing. Next issue is the latest on electric vehicle subsidies and how that affects the coming ban on gas vehicles in our state. So there are kind of two elements here. One is the federal government under the Trump administration ended electric vehicle subsidies, which research by Todd had shown was going to the wealthiest people anyway and was not being effective in protecting the environment. But the Trump administration has pulled that back. Washington State has backfilled that and is still providing electric vehicle subsidies, again, under the Ferguson administration here locally, following the example of California in imposing climate policies. So they're trying to keep that in place in our state. But there is a 2022 law that was passed with great fanfare that new gasoline-powered vehicles could not be registered in this state after the year 2035. It's a little hard to tell whether that ban is still in place. The Trump administration pulled back the waiver for California and by extension, Washington and Oregon and 17 other states that had said that they were going to put this ban in place. The matter is in court, but that shows the confusion that we're having from different levels of government. The other aspect of that is part of the mandate is electric vehicle truck sales are going to be required in our state up to a certain percentage of the market. Again, they're failing to meet these goals, number one. Number two, apparently a electric vehicle truck for long haul, commerce costs up to $400,000, whereas a traditional diesel truck costs $150,000. The diesel truck can haul a lot more, meaning fewer trips. The electric vehicle long haul truck can't carry as much. That means more trucks, more load on the roads, and more trips. So all of that results in more inefficiency in the market. Advocates of this mandate complain that there's a market failure because trucking companies are not buying the electric trucks. What they don't understand, or actually they refuse to understand, is that the free marketplace is voluntary. It's a form of economic democracy. People vote with their dollars. Political advocates don't like to give up their ideological faith that some climate change idea is going to work when people reject it in the marketplace. So advocates can talk all day long and blame trucking companies or vehicle consumers for not buying more electric vehicles. The only thing that matters is whether people find it to be useful and worth their money. In terms of electric cars, that is working. They are popular, they're effective, and a lot of people like them. So therefore, that makes sense. What doesn't make sense is a mandate that forces people to spend money on something they don't want to spend their money on. So again, we'll see how that plays out. Another reason I mentioned that example is when you have blue states opposing or arguing and challenging virtually everything that the federal government does, you end up with what I call push me, pull me government, where your average citizen can't understand whether gas vehicles are going to be banned in our state in the next 10 years or so or not. It creates a constant open question. And so we think that state and federal officials should reduce the amount of conflict that there is and try to come up with a single policy that everybody can understand. Last item I'll touch on is that Charles Prestrud had an important op-ed in the Seattle Times. The title of it is "Sound Transit Light Rail Doesn't Make the Grade." He's showing how Sound Transit consistently falls short on their own goals, that they are not delivering the public services that they promise to the public. Their ridership has never met their targets, as a matter of fact. And yet they continue to put out glowing promises to the public in order to try to tamp down dissent about the billions of dollars that we are giving to this agency. Another aspect of this that I wanted to mention is we are excited about the growth of free speech and media platforms like the one that we're on, YouTube channels and X and places like that, that are not part of what I call dinosaur gatekeeper media in the past. At the same time, we are happy to work with legacy media like the Seattle Times. And if they publish a guest op-ed from Charles, we think that's great. We're always happy to work with them. There are times when I suspect that our audience might be getting bigger than theirs. So they consider themselves major media. I think that is increasingly becoming less the case, and that alternative access to information is actually attracting more ears and eyeballs than these traditional outlets have. That's a major structural change that's happening in our country. I think it's a good thing because it provides more information to people, more give and take, more opinions, more freedom of speech. That's always a good thing. Lastly, I'll mention events that are coming up. So our next online On the Go series on Tuesday is on November 11th. And then we have a major panel, expert panel in Spokane called Saving Hospitals, How to Fix the Crisis with Finances and Patient Care. Elizabeth New, our healthcare expert, will be part of that. And that is on November 19th. More information is on our webpage under the events section. And with that with that summary, I will wrap up, and I'll be back next time. Thanks for listening.
If you found this informative, share it with a friend, and consider checking out one of our suggested videos over here. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay up to date with the latest policy news from Washington.